back, and this is Denise Mraz at vegasviews.com. And I just wanted to let you know where you can get a hold of me after today if you want to reach out. So that's www.don'tcaliforniaournevada.com and go to the Vegas Views tab. Now, I had a couple of wonderful donors that heard our show last week and sent us some very nice gifts, and we do accept those at that website. So if you have any concerns, issues, or questions, and if you want to donate, well, we'd be more than happy to use that towards our philanthropic opportunities, and one of those is coming up on Sunday. So last week we did the March on the Strip for religious freedom. I don't know if you saw, actually, I did get interviewed on Channel 3. They aired the episode at 11 o'clock. And what we did was we marched for religious freedom. We had about 100 cars, about 150 people. It was a great turnout for a rainy Sunday afternoon. But more importantly, it brought people together. And in, prayerful mindfulness, we took this on and we did a drive down the strip. A lot of groups were there. Recall Sislak was there. And the, the problem with the religious freedom issue was that Governor Sislak felt that he was in his rights to shut down churches. Now, you've got two camps. One of the camps is that everyone can get sick, therefore we should social distance and not gather. The other camp says that we should use personal protocols and gather as we see fit. So these are the two camps. One is, pro government intervention, and the other one is pro personal liberty. I'd like to hear from my callers to see what side of the fence you're on this subject. And while I'm waiting for you to call in at 702-650-5588, I'll just tell you we have a personal protocol camp. And what it is, hey, if you need to quarantine, quarantine. Have no problem with that. However, if you are healthy and well and you want to go out and live your faith in any way possible, that's volunteering, that's going to services, that's worshiping at your discretion, you should be able to do that, in my opinion. And to that effect, on Sunday, this coming Sunday, we've got a wonderful event. It's sponsored by KKVV. It's one of our first community events of the year, and it's called Freedom Rocks. Now, this is so fun. Sunday 1 to 4 in Mountain's Edge, and it's the terminus, the South Rainbow terminus, where West Star meets the very end of Rainbow Boulevard, right there, Mountain's Edge. There's a massive flat wash basin. Now so what is this? April. Last October I was there and we did a major cleanup of that area. So I know that there's a nice big flat area out there. Well, what we're going to do is get 6 to 12-inch rocks and spell out the word freedom with the rocks, but it'll be so big you could see it from Google Earth. And we have coordinated efforts all around the state for churches and just folks getting together to in celebration of our Earth and Earth Day in putting together this Freedom Rocks event. So I hope you'll come out. It's free. It's 1 to 4. And we've got a couple great sponsors. KKVV is sponsoring it, Rollin' Smoke Barbecue, and we'll keep updating you throughout the week on our new sponsors. Candidates for office will be there, and just families getting out and enjoying the sunshine. So I hope you'll come out. And again, that's 1 to 4 Sunday. It's called Freedom Rocks event. And I've got that on my Facebook at Don't California Our Nevada if you want to share it. So the next thing up is, oh my gosh, what hasn't happened this last week? We are all getting a master class in constitutionalism, aren't we? Trump is just totally slaying it. So on Sunday, I knew that there was going to be a big event. I didn't realize what that was until Monday. What happened Saturday night was this. The state of Wyoming had one COVID attributable death. Therefore, they declared Wyoming a national disaster for one death of the whole state. Well, I didn't know this, but there was an executive order when all 50 states are declare a national disaster, then the presidency flips over to the director of FEMA. Well, the director of FEMA is a Marine, so we know Trump is protected because our veterans and our Marines are protecting Trump. But more importantly, the day before, on April 10th, he had reminded us through a memorandum on whitehouse.gov that the director of Veteran Affairs and in effect the commander in chief, Trump, was still in total control of our government, even though he knew that there would be a final state that would be declaring a national disaster area. So I wrote about this, and a newspaper called me in Australia, believe it or not, and they wrote in and thought that this was pretty interesting because the article is on my blog, and the title Is Trump Still President? Well, yes, he absolutely is still president. But the way that it all came about was something that, unless you study these things for decades, and he has studied them, and that's part of Q. Q is the plan, the storm, the wall. And who studied these things? Well, I believe that JFK Jr. is behind Q plus as the head of our Navy. And the reason is on July 4th, Trump, when the Thunderbirds went overhead of the White House lawn celebration, he made that sign with the circle and the line through one third of it. Well, we know that that's the Q plus signal for the head of the Navy. Well, on July 2nd, just a few days earlier than that, Vice President Pence's plane, Air Force Two, was turned around at the edge of airspace of DC, and the call sign got changed. Why did that happen? Well, allegedly, Vice President Pence was going to a deep state meeting. He got caught, and they turned his plane around, changed the call sign, and allegedly he was displaced under the kind of a Romulus Act, and I can explain that in a minute. And perhaps who knows what happens if Pence is just a placeholder. Allegedly he is. We'll know all these facts in a few years or maybe a few months. But for right now, I do believe we will see the advancement of JFK Jr. Now, JFK Jr. and Trump talk on Twitter all the time. And in my article, I pointed out 3 examples just in the last week where they are giving each other a thumbs up, or they're, interacting with each other. So you can look at that article and see those. So I know that a lot of people do feel that the JFK Jr. story is a narrative that is a conspiracy theory. But I want to go back to the 1970s. So in 67, Mondale had a massive, I'll call it truth red pilling, that he wanted to do regarding the assassination of JFK Sr. Well, he was not able to do this because the CIA stepped in and used the story, which was leaked, and they came up with an operation. And part of the operation was called Mockingbird, which then gave narratives for the mainstream media to debunk these alleged conspiracy theorists who were really truth hawks. So at that time, in the late 60s, early 70s, you started to find that the CIA was really starting to control the narrative. Well, along comes Clinton, and what did he establish? CIA-based CNN. Now, CNN was the allegedly a new cable channel, if you remember that, but it really was a government propaganda operation. And we know now that CNN is just bottom of the barrel, like 1% truth, if any, and skewing everything to make sure that people don't understand what the truth really is. And that's the hard part about this whole entire situation we have going on right now, because it's hard to find out what is truth and what isn't, because we are hardwired for the truth as humans. We just are. And there's a lot of people that are working in realities that are very tough, and they just want to get to the truth. In fact, they've given up on social media. They've given up on a lot of, I'll call it old standbys. And so all I can say is if you are there and I know your frustration, then take a break. But here's one thing you can always rely on: go to Trump's Twitter. Oh, okay. My producer just sent me a note. So I'm hoping that you don't give up, stay in the fight, but it's hard because what used to be black is what is white is black, and you hear things like follow the white rabbit. Well, what does that mean? Well, I think what it means is go from the dark, where the rabbits are, to the light. Follow them out of the tunnel. Follow the white rabbit. What's the other part of the rabbit conspiracy theory? Well, rabbits used to be used in magic tricks, right? So a lot of the things that are going on right now are psyops, and they're actually hat tricks. But if you follow Trump, he is never going to let us down. He always has our back. And he's got 500 generals around him, and they're never going to let us down either, because promises made, promises kept. So we'll see you in a minute, and this is Denise at Vegas Views.
VVAM 1060 Las Vegas.
All right, we're back. And so I'm just kind of going on. So I started a little bit about the conspiracy theory. So in the 60s and early 70s, you had the CIA pushing a narrative. And so how did they push that narrative? Well, they did it in all kinds of ways. They, over the years, they normalized messaging to us. They used Hollywood to normalize things. They did all kinds of, I'll call it hat tricks, to get us to accept certain things as normal, which were anti-constitutional, and they used it, a myriad of indoctrination systems. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was the announcement about an hour ago that Trump halted funding for WHO, which is the World Health Organization. Now, he did this because China had covered up the Wuhan virus COVID-19 situation. Now, we won't know the whole truth for a while, but here are some things we do know. We absolutely know that Tedros Adhanom was, so Dr. Tedros, he is the head of WHO. He's in the pocket of Bill Gates. Bill Gates is a multi-generational megalomaniac who believes his views are that vaccines and certified vaccinations are the way to go. Well, they're not. And we can get into that later. But this doctor that's running WHO isn't a doctor. He's actually a Marxist terrorist. And if you don't think that they knew what they were doing, they absolutely know what they were doing. They knew what they were doing. And this has trickled down to certain states having non-doctors be chief medical officers. And sadly, Nevada is one of those states. Our Dr. Ilsan, who is our Nevada chief medical officer, is not licensed to practice medicine in America or Nevada. He practiced, he was an OBGYN in the Middle East in the 80s. And then he came here, and Governor Sandoval appointed him in 2018 to run our medical board or dental board. Well, we all know the corruption at the medical and dental boards, and that essentially they had programs that they were trying to run the doctors and the dentists out, and that's still true today. In fact, I know a dentist who just got a letter, and his small dental office of 5 chairs has to be put into negative pressure situations. So, what that is this is crazy. They want dentist offices to be made into basically sealed operating rooms so that they're negative pressure, so that germs can't float around as easy, and that they have to be professionally sterilized between each patient. Well, this obviously will raise dental care cost significantly, and for small practices that only have 4 or 5 chairs, it's going to be very difficult to try to comply with this because it'll require more people, raise the price, slow down care, and I mean, let's face it, who got COVID 19 from dental offices? Nobody. And in speaking of the COVID 19, I'll get back to that, but we do know that sadly, doctors are being forced, privileged licensed medical professionals are being absolutely forced and compelled into reporting deaths of, say, a primary cause of a car accident, old age, and other factors as a COVID 19 death when essentially just the decedent's blood was tested and they tested positive for the virus. And believe me, there's a ton of false positives and false negatives in all of that testing. And that was by Dr. Annette Tajero. She put out a great report today about that. But I do want to say that, since 2012, the NIH has put out a lot of information about how the flu shot contained the SARS virus. So I put that in my article on my blog and you can read it. But the flu shot has contained this virus since 2012. And just think of how many people were compelled by either a TAM license or some kind of healthcare permission to get a flu shot. And of course, if you've been to the doctor, you can't go from room to room without somebody asking you, did you get your flu shot? Did you have your flu shot? Did you get it get that shot yet? And the flu shot contains it. So that is all on the NIH website, and you can see it for yourself in my blog article. But anyway, going back to these doctors, so privileged licensed dentists and doctors are being forced out of business by ridiculous requirements. And what they're trying to do is drive the public to only be able to go to hospitals because hospitals are obviously very expensive and the government has a lot more control over hospitals, and that is the basis of all of these things going on right now is the amount of control that the government wants to exercise over us and our healthcare. In fact, they don't want to just control us, but they want to actually create our pathway and perhaps not to better health because look at the vaccines they're pushing. The vaccines, they're tainted potions from China. They have been for a long time. And that's going to change because more pharmaceuticals will be made in America, which will be the greatest thing that comes out of this situation we're in right now. However, it's still not that way. And so I just challenge you, if you have a doctor that you know, ask him what are his challenges that he's facing from the state. Does he feel like he's getting a fair shake, that he can actually provide patient client privilege in the form of confidentiality? And I think what you'll find is I'll call it fringe, non pediatric doctors are going to be the first ones to come out and be whistleblowers and say, we cannot provide the medical public trust that is required of us by our do no harm Hippocratic oath. And more doctors are coming out and saying this. The second thing is that the death certificates are being, the numbers are being skewed because they're misreporting the primary cause of death as COVID-19 to get more money from the government. So the good news is Trump knows all this and he's not giving in. And because we are all under national disaster relief status and medical martial law, he is prevailing and he will prevail. He's not going to let us down. So I did want to also talk a little bit about our effort regarding these doctors and dentists that are under Nevada's the purview of the chief medical officer, who is, I'm told, an Islamist. And, you know, there's a lot that goes along with that, particularly anti-constitutional thinking, but also that the Medical and Dental Board is trying to drive out primary providers who have a lot of training and wisdom to get us to accept um, lesser trained professionals. So I'll just give you the example. 4 years ago, I testified in Carson City on a bill. And what the anesthetist. So these are the people sedating us in surgeries. What the bill was advocating was that an anesthetist essentially had a network of, I'll call it, candy striper sedation artists who were going to be sitting into each surgery, and they were going to be supervising up to 10 of these, I'll call them candy striper sedation artists, while we were in surgery. Now, obviously, how can you be an anesthetist and monitor 8 to 10 surgical patients at any one time and not have an accident? There's going to be one, absolutely. And of course, I advocated it as opposition to this bill, but this whole medical drive to drive out our good doctors and dentists and replace them with lesser trained people, this has been going on for a while. And it's not just Nevada, but all the states have this happening. So, the best thought there I can see is to follow Trump, follow religious freedom, because in Trump's establishment of the civil office in the Health and Human Services Division of Conscientious Objectors and Religious Exemption, he has set up a new complaint system. This was set up in January. Now, I don't check it that often now, but I was checking it very often until about 4 months ago. But they had fielded over 200,000 complaints. And these complaints were from patients that were being hassled, bullied, or harassed by medical professionals to take unnecessary, uh, experimental medical procedures. Or it was even medical professionals that were being forced into vaccines or other types of things. So Trump knows this, and he has an office dealing with this right now, and it's called the Civil Division, Civil Office for Religious and Conscientious Objectors. And that's why religious freedom is such a paramount and necessary fight. We all know that the Tree of Liberty, we're told, has to be watered, and sometimes that's by our blood, sweat, and tears. We as vigilant citizens cannot sit back and just pray and just hope and just wish. We cannot be passive in our vigilance and our duty to protect our rights. But we've been put on this track to act passive because we just simply don't know what's going on. Our government is so big and things are so complex and there's so much to know. And we just have no idea that these glass walls are being built up around us to limit our rights. I mean, look at how easily, in the snap of a finger, that our endowed liberties got taken away from us, and we were turned into a massive house arrest situation over uh, this virus. And it was because of the fear porn being put out by mainstream media that was reporting deaths that were essentially what they were saying attributed to COVID 19, but they weren't. These are deaths by and large that would have occurred anyway, or perhaps the person tested COVID 19 positive. Why? Well, the flu shot has it in it. So if you got a flu shot, it's very likely and plausible that you will test positive for the virus. So I did want to just kind of say those things. And, you know, going forward, as we find out more and more, we're going to start bumping up into people who say, if that was really true, I'd know about it. Well, here's what my response is to that. We want to know about it. We're all hardwired for the truth. And my best thought there is to say we have all been continually lied to. We've been continually, chronically lied to about our history, about what's going on in the world, because we're dealing with statistics that were put out to control a narrative that isn't true. It's false. And so, how do we change this? Well, Trump knows how we're going to change it. And if you want the truth, go to Trump's Twitter because he's always going to tell us the truth. And I really liked it the other day. He put out a tweet yesterday that the states are under all his control right now. And that's true. So, governors that want a bunch of free stuff, so Cuomo was pointed out by Trump, and he said, Governor Cuomo wants all this free stuff and now he wants to be independent. Well, Trump said that's not happening. And I just give him so much credit. And every minute I'm just checking that whitehouse.gov. I'm looking at the Twitter feed. And that's how we're going to get through this. We want to get through it by the truth. We want to figure out what that is. And if you know some truths that I don't, I'd love to hear them. Give us a call at the call-in number 702 650 5588. So, with my last 15 minutes here, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we have going on for religious freedom. So, Sunday we had this fantastic drive on the strip, and it was to recognize our religious freedom, but more importantly, how the Constitution helps us um, protect our religious freedom. And there was a fantastic article that I posted on my Facebook a few days ago about this, about how it, how the Constitution helps, in effect, our religious freedom. And I wanted to read you something from that. And also, I'll be posting more of these kinds of things at the website righttoworship.com. So you can always go there and see these interviews for Vegas Views, Right to Worship, and lots of other great stuff. So let's see here if I can get to that. Uh, oh, no, it was on the Facebook. Let me try that. So our right to worship is so important, and one of the things I wanted to read to you verbatim was the story told to the Puritans by George Washington. So they were upset with George Washington because the Puritans felt that being confrontational, in fact, participating in wars, was wrong. And he explained to them that pacifism is no excuse to not uh, take up our liberties. And I have to agree because if we're not going to fight for them and Trump's not going to be president for forever. And Tucker Carlson kind of went off on this tangent the other day, and I agree that if we don't take back our country, starting with our kids and learning our constitutional heritage, which is the freedom documents, the Federalist Papers, and all the reasons why we should be vigilant for our rights, we're we're going to be right back in this situation because evil never sleeps. That's a fact. We know that, and we cannot abdicate our responsibility to protect our freedoms in any way. And that's sadly part of our situation that we have here now. So I wanted to say, if you feel like you perhaps are doing them as much as you can do, take that thought and then extend a little bit. Just challenge yourself every day. What else can I do to help secure my freedom? Because we have to change our thinking. We have been allowed to be pacifist, not just for our faith, but for our right to worship, and also redefining what what words really mean. You know, look at the downfall of Rome. Rome had 22 reasons, main reasons why it fell: pedophilia, debauchery, crime. There was a lot of mistrust of the government, and there was overreach of the government. All of these things contributed to the fall of Rome. And we're going through that exact same exercise right now. So, what are some of the ways that you're reaching out? And we have a caller. Hopefully, they'll tell us. Hello, caller. I'm Denise, and we're here at KKVV. Oh, I can't hear.
Oh,
There it is.
this is Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer. You're Jennifer on Vegas Views. How are you doing?
Good. I was calling in response to what you're talking about,
Yes.
and I think people need to realize we are in a battle. We're in a war.
Yes, it's a spiritual
Yes,
warfare.
and it's a
Absolutely.
different kind, and we've been being programmed for years,
Decades.
and yeah, and that's why we don't know. We get confused
Yes.
at what we're hearing, and until we get the truth, like you were saying, but the truth originates with God's word,
It does.
and we have to go back to the spirit of liberty, as it says in the Bible,
Hmm.
and that's what this country was established on.
So, the spirit of liberty, let's take that thought for example. So, I have a little equation I use: liberty equals freedom plus conscientious living.
Hmm.
So, let's say our freedom is the right to travel. So, the conscious living is, should we travel at 100 miles an hour down a residential street? No.
No,
But because our government has crept in and taken over so many of our, I'll call it, right to exercise common sense, that we have now abdicated our responsibility for following rules to the point where we have put ourselves in little glass boxes.
right,
And the other part of that is that because we don't exercise self restraint, we start having to follow all these rules, curfews, keep the music down after 8 o'clock. Well, if we knew common courtesy, then those wouldn't be rules. But because there is no common sense, no common courtesy, now these governments crept in and told us what to think, how to think, when to think it, and why.
right, and that's because people don't take the responsibility and pay attention to their belief systems
Yes.
and being swayed by, and that's only been something that's been going on throughout history.
Yes, totally. So, what do you think is our biggest challenge right now? Is it resetting ourselves so that we can kind of get our true north compass? Or is it that we build up the people around us? Because if we are all captains of our own ship, but we need all the ships going in the right direction, and because there's a prevailing wind. And if we are crisscrossing too much, we're obviously going to sink. So, how do we get everybody, maybe not on board with our ship, but get all the ships moving in one direction?
Well, that's what the Constitution is for.
It is,
And it
yes.
started with our generation. I'm 65,
Mm-hmm.
in making it less and less in the teaching.
Yes,
And people have got to get back to the Constitution
they
because that's
absolutely do.
where our course is aligned.
Yes, and so let's just bring up a very valid point there. So our course is aligned because we live by endowed liberties, but
Hmm.
the Constitution does not give us our rights. The Constitution was produced to limit government.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to understand if you don't really know what's happening because a lot of people following rules right now have been brought up in these indoctrination systems like you were alluding to a minute ago, and they just cannot function in a I'll call it a self-limiting environment.
Well, and that's what happened with the slaves in the Israelites. They
Mhm.
had come from slavery,
Mhm.
and that's why God gave them the laws. I think, in my studies,
Mhm.
and because we have to have those guidelines,
Sure.
but they're guidelines,
Guidelines,
and
yes.
the reasoning needs to come from some kind of a solid, a truthful platform.
Mhm.
So our mindsets and our belief system needs to go back to God's word.
It does.
First of all,
God's word, one nation under God.
right.
What do you know about the principles of the Constitution?
I need to go back and study it some
Me
more,
too.
but
Yes, because every so often they'll come up. I think there's about 20 of them.
yes,
But, we've got like right to travel, right to worship, all of those things. But then there's other principles, and once you get some of those down, they become such a simple litmus test that is a disinfectant because it shines a light exactly on these problematic, I'll call it overreaching government.
overreaching.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So, right to travel is kind of an easy one, but I know that for a fact there were certain movements that took the right to travel and said, well, that was cross border. No, it wasn't. Constitutionally, that was never right to travel from one nation to another. It was only state, nation, or intra-state,
Right.
not it.
Inter.
Right, it wasn't intra-country.
Yes.
And that's where you have the open borders movement who felt that, the right to travel, particularly the sovereign citizen movement, which, the sovereign citizens didn't have it all wrong. But that's what Satan does, doesn't he? He kind
Yes.
of enters a little bit of truth and
Right.
then twists it.
Yep.
And it makes it so hard because if you don't have those guiding principles, uh, you know, it can be, you start to hear these arguments and they kind of make sense and they kind of don't. And then you're guilty because they draw on your guilt that, well, you were born American, so you were lucky. These other people weren't. But we're all in the place that God put us
Right. For a reason.
for a reason. And
Yeah.
our time here was predestined from the moment before we were born.
Right. Well, and I think one of the important things is, and two things, we got to get back to the Constitution, understand what it says, what it's there for.
Yes, and the Federalist Papers are a great
Yes,
way to do that.
right. And also the fact that we're not dealing on opinions, and that's what they've done throughout the years, is
Yes.
taken and make it, well, it's a living document. No, it's
No, it's
not.
not.
It is the legal law of the land.
Yes, and it's not an intervention, it's not an intention, it is not an invention.
Right.
It
It's
it's
the
a
law
it's the
of the
law.
land.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, for people that don't know, is to look up Hillsdale College.
Hillsdale College is great. Don't they have you taken their Constitution
I
101?
no, but I've got it on my computer.
That's great.
But we did homeschooling, so I homeschooled my kids,
Oh, that's
and they're
fantastic.
all grown now and got their own kids. But to
Mhm.
have that foundation,
Mhm.
we've got to go back to the Hillsdale College. They have a free
Yes.
constitutional class that they give all the
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
It's taught by the professors that teach that at the college to
Yes.
every student
Mhm.
that's at Hillsdale College.
Mhm.
So I think it's great that they have it online like that. And now, while the people aren't doing anything, now's the time to hit it.
No kidding. Well, especially as we're all kind of sequestered, but we're hopefully
Yeah,
stretching our wings and getting out of that mode. Lastly, I wanted to wind up because the show's going to end here in a few minutes. But Marbury versus Madison, 1805, and this was a Supreme Court ruling that said all laws repugnant to the Constitution are null and void. So when we get caught up in that, well, each state has their own separate rules. The rules for the states and the states' rights were very restricted. And they're totally out of the box on that. We've got to get states back into their box and government back into its box. So,
right.
yeah, Marbury versus Madison, all laws repugnant to the Constitution are null and void. And I've so enjoyed you calling in, and I hope you'll call in again soon.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you,
Hmm.
dear.
All right. God bless.
You too.
Bye.
So we're just going to be wrapping up here, but I did want to just say that to all the listeners out there, www.don'tcaliforniaornevada.com, Vegas Views TV, that's where you'll find me. And if you want to hear a show on something that you're curious about, reach out to me and let me know. Hope to see you Sunday at the Freedom Rocks event, and that's at the terminus of South Rainbow Boulevard and West Star. You'll get there, see a bunch of cars, bring a rock. Bring about a 6 to 12-inch rock. Help us build the word freedom in celebration of our Earth and Earth Day. And if you need anything else, give us a Facebook shout out at don'tcaliforniaornevada.com or American First Faith. So until next time, it's Denise Mraz at Vegas Views. Bye for now.